I would say possibly conflict in what I'm hearing here that might, in my book, even impact the pipeline. And it comes back to the issues of confidence, being confident and conveying confidence, and also the natural athlete idea, which over the course of my life, I've increasingly given up on being natural at most things. and instead going back, and what you said about lifelong learning and hard work. But I also do believe that when you come in with any kind of a viewpoint of being a natural something, you might not have all you need to do. So I would just love for anyone on the panel, I mean, it's come up from several of you, but in terms of young people looking at these careers right now, if they were listening to me, who should be not talking on the panel, I would say you don't need to be natural at anything. You need to be gifted at learning and gifted at hard work, and that's, So just a question for you about that.
Can I take a crack at this first? Since I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, of course, I believe that you can be learning these things. Otherwise, I would be out of the job. And, obviously, when you think about being an athlete or a musician or anything, there's a full range from learning competence to actually being a prodigy or somebody extraordinary. But there are many, many sort of fundamentals of what are the processes, what are the principles, what are the skills that you need, and definitely those can be learned. I want to just make a comment because I studied 250 startups that came out of the MIT Enterprise Forum. And what I found from those entrepreneurs was that about 95% of them started businesses that I'll say were pretty much derivative from what they were doing before. They had been in their workplace, they had found what was wrong, and it was usually some reasonably small gap, and they were judged as totally competent to actually address that piece. So it was clearly, if you will, a message of you can learn, and you've already learned most of what you need to do, and now you're bridging a small gap. And I definitely think that there's a great hope and great promise for those of us who are not natural-born entrepreneurs or athletes to actually prepare ourselves, to develop experience, and while somebody else is a CEO and you're some other C officer, but to actually develop the credibility and make it. Now let my colleagues answer that as well.
No, I would agree with your response, Maya. I think what you want to do, if your objective is to go be an entrepreneur at some point in your career, then go work in a startup company, and kind of shadow the CEO and watch the fundraising process, watch the team building process, and really. So I think you can build your own experience set and your skill set by kind of the path that you take, and that will benefit you later.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that what Ann said about being very hardworking and enjoying learning are really those two things, along with an appetite for risk. I think you do need an appetite for, be very comfortable with risk, so that because you get a vision, and sticking to it requires you to tolerate risk. But if you have those, that would be how I would describe myself. I'm extremely hardworking, and I really enjoy learning new things, but I wouldn't say I have any particular talent at anything.
Well, the other thing, I think the other quality that you need is sort of a thick skin. Because, you are going to go out there, and a lot of people are going to tell you can't do this, that's a dumb idea. You're going to hear a lot of negative feedback, and I think you have to be able to say, okay, I'll take that feedback and incorporate it or not, and it's not a personal, it's business. It's a personal, it's not a personal statement. You can't take these things personally, and I think, if you start to do that, it's a very difficult road, I think.
Yeah, I'll go back to some basketball analogies, since I've led my whole life through basketball analogies. If you take two players, Larry Bird and Michael Jordan, Larry Bird used to have to practice for hours and hours making free throws, and he became an extraordinary basketball player. Michael Jordan didn't have to practice as much. He just had to stay in good shape because he was really, the penultimate natural athlete. But both of them were natural athletes. So, what makes you a natural athlete? I do think it is that you really have figured out where your core skills are, because you can't just start from zero and learn everything. I know a few people that are close friends of mine that seem to be able to pick up everything and, learn things. Few of our venture capital colleagues have gone into phone booths and suddenly became clean tech investors, but, because they're smarter than us. But you really do have to have some core, whether it is just that I discovered, I'm starting to build a base somewhere. It's you get many times in your life, and Diane talked about many of her life junctures where she could have dialed the dial a different way in her life, but she didn't. It was actually kind of, divining its own course, and even though she said she doesn't have any core skills, I somehow doubt that.
I didn't say I didn't have core skills. I just didn't feel like I had some particular exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think the thick skin thing, you got to be careful with that, because you don't get a lot of opportunities as a leader of a company to be extraordinarily emotional without it backfiring. Passionate is one kind of emotion, but sort of a lot of emotion, kind of other than in kind of your own deep personal feelings, don't work for most employees. They want leadership. They don't want to know you that well. They just want to know that their company is going to be successful. But your skin has to be sort of thin too, because you really have to listen carefully. You can't assume that you're screwing up or doing right. And this is this learning thing that you really, especially in our industry, it's like, we were sitting there before the panel talking about, the competitive landscape as it exists today. It's like you wake up one day and you're in a different, you're different in a different arena in our industry. You thought one day that your competitor was IBM, and the next day it turns out it's Larry Ellison. So, you really have to sort of build your, a way that you have a constituency that you learn from, how you march forward. And what I like to say is that you have to sort of, always be marching forward. If you drag everything that's happened to you along the way, you get really a heavy load to carry. And that's one of the failure points we see on a lot of people on this thing where you said being yourself. Sometimes people are too much of themselves. They're every day of their lives themselves, and we see it played out. And that really is one of the demarcations for us for being successful, that you learn and move forward. You learn and move forward. And, that's one of the real challenges in our industry, to have that unique capability to do that.
Actually, I have to give that one a sailing metaphor, because I grew up racing sailboats, and I would say that I periodically am it's a new race. Okay, there's new wind, there's new current. I got some new sails on my boat, and I'm going to get to the finish line first. But it's there's one sort of Uber race going on, certainly, but there's a lot of new races every day that have nothing to do with the race the day before. Yeah.
Okay. We have a lot of questions in the queue, so we'll go right back up to you, and then to Hannah, then to you, and then to you.
I have a question that builds up on the confidence issue. I'm an engineering faculty member here at Stanford, and also in a male-dominated environment, be it not the same industry as you are. But one of the things I see with a lot of females, colleagues as well as students and graduate students that I'm trying to mentor and coach into staying in academia is two things. One is what I would call the cliff syndrome, is that the girls especially are very worried, actually deep down, lack this confidence that they will do well consistently throughout their career, and they're on the lookout for signs that really they're not good enough. And so I call this sort of this leaving at first failure. So I see a lot of the women that at some point get rejected, either they get rejected in a postdoc job offer or their paper gets rejected, and their reaction is, see, I'm not good at this. I always feared I wasn't good enough, despite of all the evidence, and this is now my quitting point. And a lot of the women leave academic life partly because of this. You see this also in high school. I've seen this with freshmen. I've seen this with graduate students. So my first question would be, have you seen similar things in your industry? The other thing has to do with the perception of confidence. One of the things that I've noticed is that very established female colleagues in engineering, for example, who are members of the Academy of Sciences or Engineering, are rated by peers, by students, often as not having enough knowledge or just as much knowledge or as much confidence as their male colleagues, not just because they don't have this confidence or they don't have this knowledge, but simply because they have another way of talking to people, another way of communicating. To give you one example, when they teach a course, they may say in return to a question, answer to a question, that's a very good question, I need to think about it, because they want to be inclusive, because they want to stimulate thought, rather than, as a lot of my male colleagues do at conferences or in the classroom, saying, oh, I know that, that's A, B, and C. And that's perceived as a lack of confidence. To me, it's just a different way of communicating a skill set of being present, and has nothing to do with confidence. So my next question is part of this problem that you see with confidence and women not coming across as being confident enough, is that a different communication set that the women have, not necessarily lack of confidence, but more a lack of perception? And if so, how much does this lack of patterns that you talked about earlier on, how much does that play a role? And do you see that changing? Do you see that maybe what I would call more of a female approach to answering questions, to putting cases forward, is becoming more accepted?
So there's a lot there. So I guess so I think on your first question, first of all, I think what's great about Silicon Valley is that failure is actually great. I mean, in that you can learn from that and move on. This whole notion of, learn and then, think about it, reflect on it, and then move on. What did I get from that? And so I think it's maybe to address your broader question, it's kind of more of a mindset. And I think it's something that can be learned, and I think probably there's some style issues that are just people are just who they are. But I think from a mindset perspective, I think if you can change your mindset to that of why won't this work? Why can't I do this? To I'm going to make this happen, and here's visualize that and kind of figure out how you're going to get there. So I think. I think the mindset of saying, yes, okay, that didn't work out, but here's why it didn't work out, and here's what I'm going to do differently next time, and I am going to try it again. So I think to get the girls to start to think that way, as opposed to looking for reasons why they shouldn't go down that path, I think is important. So I don't know if you have.
I actually just wanted to add to that, just perfectly. I had a really interesting conversation recently with the president of MIT, Susan Hockfield, and she said that when they're admitting people, and they're now 47% female, that one of the strongest predictors of success is someone that has had some failure so far and recovered from it, and so that's one of the filters they put in their admissions process, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, and just what we've been talking about before is there is sort of a myth that this entrepreneurial world is sort of one of these friendly clubhouses, and you just get to leave the big buildings where you kind of feel like you're alone in your cubicle, and you